Good evening, members. Good evening, everybody watching at home. Welcome to today's meeting of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee on Monday, the 10th of November. I'll begin with some apologies. I've received apologies from Councillor Taylor, who's substituted by Councillor Maroney, and from Councillor Watson, who is substituted by Councillor Healy. So welcome both. I've also had apologies from Councillor Douglas for the council motions agenda item later. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare anything in relation to tonight's agenda? No? Thank you. Agenda item 3, minutes. We've got 2 sets of minutes to approve. The first is from the meeting on the excuse me, the 8th of September. Do any members have any comments on the accuracy of those minutes? No, there was one matter arising it's on page 10 of the agenda pack. Head of Business Intelligence agreed to work with colleagues in customer services to put together some information on the detail of the wait times in the customer call journey that arose from a discussion around better understanding some of the wait times. Ian Cunningham's been in touch to say he hasn't had a chance to do that, pull that information together, but it's on his to-do list, so that we should be receiving that shortly. So moving on to the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of October. Do any members have any matters of accuracy? Councillor Merritt?
Minor typo at the top of page 15.
So we've got carp.
Carp.
Yeah, so carp rather than carp. That's a minor correction. So are members happy to agree the 1st of October minutes? Yeah. Thank you very much. Which moves on to agenda item 4, which is public participation. We have one registered speaker this evening, and that is Flick Williams, who'll be speaking on agenda item 7, monitoring and tracking of council motions, supplementary planning documents and inclusive design. Can you hear us, Flick?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. You'll have your 3 minutes. I won't give you a 30-second warning, so please do start in your own time.
Chair, I wish to speak to elements of the motion on the social model passed at Council in October 22, all now showing as completed. The rollout of disability equality training is imminent, and that is a hugely positive step forwards. The creation of the Access Officer post has also had massively beneficial impacts. However, there are issues with how this motion has been interpreted. The Labour group in opposition asked me for a roadmap for improving our city for disabled people, and this motion was the result. We were subsequently denied a supplementary planning document on accessible York, told access will be included in all the other SPDs. How is that going? Well, the timetable promised a housing SPD in January 2025, with no sign of it still in November. And here is what I want you to understand. Disability equality training is a first step, but it is not the same as inclusive design training, which is needed by officers in planning, public realm, highways and transport. It is necessary to gain a deeper understanding of access needs, pan impairment, and certainly not achieved by the checklist approach identified in this table. Lived experience is important, but most disabled people, unless they are professionally trained, can only view things through the lens of their own impairment. There is too much reliance on the Access Forum to do the heavy lifting at present, and those of us on it, still of working age, being migrated onto universal credit with increased conditionality and requirements for work search, cannot continue giving our time and expertise for free. So as buses are the hot topic after Thursday's council, let me give you a concrete example of where lack of inclusive design training leads to failure. We were promised accessible bus stops. We were expecting that to mean live departure boards with large, easily identifiable buttons on the adjacent stands to press for audible announcements. But no, what was decided without reference to the access officer or forum was that at the foot of printed timetables would appear a small printed QR code to get audible information. First, digital exclusion. Not everyone has a smartphone, especially older people. Second, the codes are so small, visually impaired people struggle to find them, blind people not at all. The timetables are located above the seats, meaning it becomes necessary to ask other people to move to access them, an interaction many will avoid. There are also personal security implications. And lastly, they don't work. I tried 4 times last week and got Safari cannot open this page. But never mind, box ticked. Anyone with inclusive design training would have been able to identify all these problems for themselves. Do you see why we get angry when we get emails telling us information at 174 bus stops, funding by BSIP, is now fully accessible? But such a long, long way still to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Flick, for your comments. I think some of the issues raised in relation, particularly in relation to bus shelters, given that we're in a period of transitioning to a new bus shelter provider for some of the bus shelters in the city, is perhaps something that we can ask the Place Scrutiny Committee to have a look at in terms of ensuring that certainly the new shelters that are being installed are being done so mindful of some of the comments and legitimate concerns that have been raised. So if members are happy for that to be referred to Place Scrutiny, Councillor Merritt?
Yes, happy. And I think in terms of the status of the document, we need to keep that ongoing until that's resolved.
Yeah, agreed. We'll just remember to pick that up later.
I'm not sure options can be referred from public participation.
I don't think we need to decide that now. In terms of what specific issues we would want Place Committee to have a look at.
Just comment.
Yeah, obviously looking at their work plan, if accessibility, public transport accessibility, is on the work plan, and if not, we can suggest that it be added. Okay. So we'll move on to agenda item 5. This is the annual complaints, performance and service improvements report. So if I can ask officers to come and join us at the table. So just by way of background, this is the report that comes to this committee each year. Always in a slightly different different format, reflecting changes in sort of legislative requirements and other sort of system issues, but it's our opportunity to look at the council's performance in terms of complaints, but equally importantly, compliments, which is always good to see. So if I can ask Kath and Lorraine, if you'd like to introduce the report, please.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for your time this evening in allowing us to come and present this annual complaints, performance and service improvements report. Please look at the new title, the service improvements bit. That's about ensuring that we take forward and can evidence that we are learning from complaints, the recurring complaints and the themes from complaints. And it's now going to be part of the ongoing complaints handling code requirements from the Ombudsman, which is referred to later in the covering report. So this report covers the period April 2024 to March 2025, and we're asking members on committee tonight to note the performance details and the outcomes contained both in this covering report and Annex 1. I'd like to draw your attention to that this report has gone through the Council's Corporate Governance Risk and Assurance Group. It's been to Corporate Management Team, and subsequently after tonight it will go to Audit and Governance Committee. It won't be this Wednesday, although I am there on Wednesday, because I obviously have to take forward your comments, feedback and queries, etc. to that. as well. It's been compiled this year for the final time by what was called the Corporate Governance Team. We are now known as the Information Governance Team going forward, and that is following the successful transfer and completion of the transfer of all things complaints, concerns, compliments and comments into customer services, into the new team, the Complaints, Feedback and Compliance Team. We love an acronym, CFCT. I did look at calling the Information Governance Team the Privacy and Information Governance Team, but I didn't like that acronym in the end. So we separate the annual report into the two legislative areas around complaints, so children's social care complaints, then on to adult social care complaints, and then those other complaints dealt with through the corporate, what's usually referred to as the 4Cs process. So concentrating first on the children's social care complaints, as we mentioned, Councillor Fenton, it is very important to take and acknowledge and consider the compliments received. Some of those are shown on page 22, but the more examples are in section 7 in the annual report at Annex 1. During 2024 and 25, there was, as you will see, a reduction in the total number of complaints received under the children's social care procedures, and that fell from 40 in the previous reporting year to 35 this year. The analysis work that's been done to look at why there has been that decrease suggests several contributing factors: proactive measures taken from lessons learned from previous year's complaints, initiatives that are aiming to improve the understanding of the complaints procedure, but also ensuring and working with advocates, etc., not just within council service areas, but wider in the city, to ensure that children and young people are aware of their rights and are supported in raising any concerns through that legislative children's social care complaints process. Most common themes in those relate to lack of action or inappropriate action and the quality of the advice or communication delivered through those service areas. The work does continue with those service areas to address and improve those persistent issues, and that will be taken forward as part of the work of the CFCT team going forward. You can find more details on those in section 23 in Annex 1. Moving on to adult social care complaints, again, I would just draw your attention to some of the examples of compliments received into that area, and then moving on to the number of complaints handled through that statutory process. Again, there was a small decrease from 44 to, again, 35 this year. That reduction in the complaint numbers is, again, sometimes expected, year-on-year variations, etc., but it does not indicate that there's been any barriers to accessing the complaints process, and it shouldn't suggest that customers are unsupported in raising concerns that provide that valuable feedback to the council teams. This year's report also highlights that previously implemented service improvements did contribute as well to those reductions in the complaint numbers, i.e. not being responded to, which had been a concern the previous year. Again, there's further details in section 39 of the report at Annex 1. Just for your information, there was no complaints received through the public health services area of complaints that would be dealt with through the adult social care legislative procedures as well. Moving on to the corporate complaints, again, I identify some of the compliments. There are more in that list just because of the number of service areas that are covered, so we try to give examples of the different service areas across the council. Within the corporate complaints procedure, there are 2 grades. It's a funny reporting cycle because we have mid-time period had to amend the corporate policy and procedures to adhere to the Housing Ombudsman's requirements for timescales of 10 working days and 20 working days. So that happened mid-time period, etc. So for a while we were running 2 side-by-side corporate processes and timescales. So those complaints received that may have resulted in an escalation to the Housing Ombudsman had to be identified and assessed at the early stages to do the 10 working days, and then also for the 20 working days for grade 2. In later parts of the covering report, I will explain that that has all been pulled together, and there is now one set of timescales, etc. But in 24-25, there was a 1,132 complaints received compared with a 1,391 in the previous year. Again, it's typical that there can be fluctuations, but there was significant improvements made through the work with waste services around the missed green waste bin collection process and replacing lost or damaged ones during collection bins free of charge without a resident having to resort to making a formal complaint to access that processing service. There were 11 complaints that did not receive a response during that reporting period, and work has been done to identify those and make sure that those responses are responded to, even though it may be out of time. There were 332 comments logged, and that's a reduction again from 642 the year before. Again, that number of complaints received by a particular service area isn't an indication that a service area is particularly failing or performing badly in respect to the services residents expect, but more that they may be the more visible service area to every household and across the city. Collaborative work is continuing again with the council teams to ensure that learning and the service improvements that will form a bigger part of the both Ombudsman's complaint handling codes assessments going forward do lead to meaningful service enhancements and improvements, and also being able to provide that evidence that where those have happened and as a result of complaints and learning from them. There's more information in section 47 of the report at Annex 1 if you would like to look at that in more detail. So the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman does, as you are aware, an annual report and letter to the council, and also publishes its performance data. You can find that in section 2 of the report at Annex 1. The Housing Ombudsman Service does theirs slightly different. They work out their cases and determinations, and again you will see from the report that there was a decrease in the number of those findings or points of fault, maladministration, compared to the previous year. Again, the full Housing Ombudsman annual performance information is set out in Annex 1. Just to give you an overview, it's not actually part of the annual complaint report for 24-25, but it felt it would be timely, especially given the handover and the timing of both the Housing Ombudsman and the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman's complaint handling codes coming into force, to just give this committee a brief overview and information on that. So the Housing Ombudsman's annual assessment against their complaint handling code requirements has been in place for a couple of years now, and you can find the council's annual assessment and submissions on the council websites. I've put the links on in the covering report. The Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman, theirs has been in place for they started releasing information on it around 2024, but it's not going to be effective and or they'll look at their investigations against it until April 2026. So there has been some planning and some information done as part of the transfer to customer services, but also part of the work with CNT and service areas that will be affected by that. The biggest change from the LGSCO's complaint handling code is that in one fell swoop, they have half the timescales. And in one fell swoop, they've also demanded that you have at least 2 stages. The previous corporate complaints policy and procedure, for those of you that remember the years of work in getting it updated, maybe about 10 years ago, 8-10 years ago, lots of committee and members' involvement and citizens groups and residents input into that. We looked at reflecting the legislative complaints process and put in an assessment of complexity in nature and made it a stage 1 or a stage 2 complaint with an appropriate timescale to complete the investigation and do the response. However, that approach will no longer mean that we met the LGSCO's requirements, so we have amended that and taken it through the changes. So you will now see that the corporate complaints process has 2 grades, one with a 10 working day timescale and one with a 20 working day timescale, and then they have the right to and be advised on escalating to the relevant ombudsman if they wish to and they remain dissatisfied. There is some ongoing work around the communication of these changes, not just to customers and residents, but also to staff and stakeholders. So the CFCT has taken those forward with ongoing communication, ongoing delivery of staff awareness and training sessions on it, and obviously from their ongoing monitoring, compliance and reports, either annually and or through to the relevant committee going forward. Another change is that there has to be what is called a member responsible for complaints, an MRC. Councillor Pavlovic was and is the Housing Ombudsman Service one and has been doing work with us on those roles and those requirements and those responsibilities. And I understand he's also going to be taken forward for the MRC for the LGSCO. Complaint Handling Code. Sorry, I know it's all acronyms. Please just wave and explain if I haven't already explained which one it is. So again, just to let you know that the rationale for the updates that we've made to those corporate complaints process was to ensure that we were in time and in line with the statutory requirements and the regulatory codes. It will enhance service quality, improve customer satisfaction, and also hopefully reduce the risks of any maladministration, etc. findings from the Ombudsman on just not being in line with their expectations and their complaints handling codes. And other than that, that's the covering report review, etc. So I would welcome any questions.
Thank you for that comprehensive introduction. And for explaining some of the changes in approach that you've had to respond to in terms of systems, which it's never easy to do mid-year, but well done on that. So, members, this is an opportunity to ask any questions and I suppose raise any suggestions or concerns on the back of some of the information presented in the report for the team to go away and consider. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. And apologies, it's one you can't answer, but you mentioned it in paragraph 23 and it lost me in the report and it lost me when you updated it as well. So a reduction in complaints overall due to us going back to collect missed bins without people complaining. Could you explain how?
So because of the definition of a complaint being a missed service request or other issue regarding a policy, etc., that it's not the first time you're hearing about it. There were concerns being raised with the service area that they must be dealt with through the complaint process. However, through working with the heads of service and the supervisors and waste services, we identified that was potentially making customers, residents jump through an unnecessary hoop and having to raise a formal complaint when it should just be a missed service request and not dealt with through a complaint process, which should only really kick in if it is that you've had the opportunity to put it right but still failed to do so. So it's the difference between a missed service request and raising a complaint. So we ironed that out, we resolved that with the service area, and that's why there was that reduction in that process.
So this isn't a case that we're being psychic and spotting missed bins that nobody else has spotted. It's the fact that people are reporting missed bins, but you're not recording them as a complaint anymore. So
they should be getting recorded as a business as usual or a missed service request, yes, because it's the first time we're getting told that there's been an issue.
Great. Thank you for explaining that. Councillor Merritt.
Yes, I wanted to follow up on your comments about service improvement requirement of the revised guidance. I think you said that that's being considered within the machine at the moment. Can I ask what the timescales are on that and how extensive the requirements of the new approach are?
So we've always had to, and we have always used and treated complaints as what I always call it's free feedback, free consultancy, to know where issues are potentially happening in any of our processes. And we've always used the phrase lessons learned or themes or actions resulting from complaints. The use of the word service improvement has come from both the Ombudsman's codes, complaint handling codes, that they want to be able to identify what service improvements have directly come from action taken in response to complaints. So we have been doing it and just not terming it service improvements, if that makes sense. And both the Ombudsman have set out their criteria in their complaint handling code to say that they will want and require evidence of service improvements. What that looks like and how and what evidence we put up as part of our assessment, I think the Ombudsman will be looking at, because it'll be the first year of the LGSCO's one, and the Housing Ombudsman has been for the last 2 years. They are still working through what does good evidence look like, what does good service improvement need to be detailed from, what should authorities and councils be using their complaints to identify where they can make those service improvements. What we've also required and asked is that complaints reporting, learning, etc. is included when looking at any of the transformation teams work, etc., to look at how that can help improve any transformation work going on and collaboration that way. But it is a little bit, we need to do our best endeavours with what we put up as part of the Ombudsman's assessment evidence that we do, and then wait to see how they work it through. There is some guidance and some information on their websites for what they expect to say, but I expect it'll be similar to what we do now, showing where we've reported into department management teams, corporate management teams, through the transformation teams, through to yourselves and ongoing future reports. This is what we were told, this is what we learned, and this is what we've changed, and this is how it looks. And I hope that that can start to be improved in how it's presented to you going forward.
Thank you. Very much welcome the latter.
Thank you. Quick question from me around the report talks about the steps you've taken to engage with service areas to share information and hopefully sort of prompt a response and improvements. The report talks about the work you've tried to do with the adult social care team and which hasn't necessarily gone as you would have wished in terms of despite several requests for invites to provide training and attend managers' meetings, you were only able to provide 3 awareness raising sessions. Is that due to the team being sort of busy with other things? Do you think there's an in principle resistance, or is it just sort of, is it a capacity issue?
I think to answer that, it's a bit of everything, mostly to do with the capacity with it when we were the corporate governance team, taking those opportunities and getting them in diaries, but also within the service area themselves, and reacting to and learning from complaints, and making sure that we were on the agendas and as a standing item like we are in some other directorates and service areas. I know this was for a particular period of time, 24-25. There has been significant other work being done, and as well as part of the work that Ailey and Anthony are leading on with the transfer into the new service. They've obviously got the ability to do that. Hello, we're the new team, we're the new provider. So there is ongoing and quite detailed requests going into the different management teams for them to take that piece of work forward, and hopefully that will improve significantly going forward.
So listening to what you've said and the question that was given, are you getting to be a standing item on adults?
I would have to take that away and ask Ailey and Anthony if they've got those diarised in, but I can certainly take that away and get an answer back to you.
Thank you.
And if you need to, I'm sure there are enough people around the table that can support you in whatever it is needs to happen.
We were making improvements, and it was Kath that would go to those, as she's the guru on all things complaints, and especially learning from them. So yeah, we will make sure that we get that sent round by email or as an update.
Thank you. Councillor Coles.
Thank you. Just first of all, it is such an encouraging report to read. So my first kind of reflection was just how do we make sure that the kind of compliments that are going through about the way in which staff who have been under huge pressure in terms of all the changes that have gone on within the local authority are still managing to deliver actually massively improving services to residents is actually really, really encouraging. And so just whatever we can do or whatever else can be done to make sure that those messages are being received by people in the children's services, in adult services, in the place, environment and transport and planning, all of those areas where actually the numbers are broadly all going in a really positive direction. I think that's just something to be really positive about. And certainly struck me, particularly the Councillor Webb's not here, but the Children's Directorate on page 46, some of those kind of comments and actually just the trend in children's in terms of compliments from complaints in previous years just feels really positive, and therefore just trying to make sure that we're acknowledging that in the report, and also the impact on costs that have to be paid out if the council's found to have had complaints upheld. Actually, again, that's all also going in the right direction. So just making sure that we're acknowledging that. I just had a couple of questions. One was really just about how the City of York Council now kind of compares in this field to other local authorities, and just what happens internally in terms of the learning that even if things are going in the right direction, that directorates then take away and look at internally within their teams to work out, yes, we don't just say brilliant, you know, it's all going in the right direction. Actually, what else do we do to make it go even further, and what else can we do in terms of learning? So it was just comparison to other areas and just how we make sure we carry on that internal learning.
So yeah, the internal learning will be significantly improvement provided going forward. I'm a great believer as well, and always have been, and I'm sure that will continue, that we need to share the good news stories as well as the figures on complaints. The council, as you may be aware, has its internal high five. It also has its all staff comms. It would be really encouraging if going forward, not just as the complaints, feedback and compliance team go to the management meetings, the surface area meetings, that they also include, I know Kath was starting to include those compliments, etc., in those updates, etc. These are the compliments that come in direct to staff that we ask them to pass on to us so that we're logging them and getting the right numbers and volumes. There is sometimes, obviously, and you can see that in some of the lower numbers where they forget to pass them on, etc. So there's that little bit of work to do to ensure that we get that all-rounded picture, not just of complaints and, as you say, where we may have got it wrong, but also where we're getting it done and getting it done well, because there is much to learn from those continuing making and providing a good service as there is to learn from complaints and service improvements. Yes, it's great to see the impacts and penalties, etc., and sanctions being put in place by the Ombudsman coming down into the right direction. Where we compare with other councils, that's always a difficult one, because it's usually that it's sometimes difficult because we do apples and pears. We've had the different processes in place, but the comparisons are usually done by the Ombudsman casework and those types of figures. But now that the complaints handling codes are setting out that you must have the 2 steps, the 10 working days and the 20 working days, I'm sure going back as there used to be maybe about 8-10 years ago, there will be that comparison benchmarking, sorry, data on near neighbours and or close neighbours to comparative councils that used to happen. Oh, it's a long time ago since I used to put the comparators in. But yes, that will be easier to do going forward because of the complaint handling code requirements. But if you are interested in comparison to other local authorities in the LGSCO cases, those are in the reports in their figures. We're about the same as most comparative authorities in their decisions. And again, just making sure that internally teams continue to learn, and not just from complaints, but from the compliments, etc., and that those are passed on.
Great, thank you very much. Was that a follow-on question? No. Okay, Councillor Maroney's next.
Well, thank you, Chair. Can I ask, do you have your own internal RAG or equivalent system? And if so, are you content that the way you can address the red rated ones or equivalent are fit for purpose? Thank you.
So I'm assuming you're meaning we only have the RAG ratings where the red, amber, green assessments where it's the legislative procedure. The corporate policies and for complaints are the two steps approach on that. And what I'll do is I'll hand over to Kath to explain, because she's more of the, as I say, the expert in the operational.
So yeah, the RAG rating is just the adult social care procedure that has the assessment and then one response, and then it goes through to the Ombudsman after that. And it's the Department of Health's RAG rating assessment that we use that's kind of set out within the report that explains how we're expected to do that. So it looks at things like risk to customers, risk to the authority, how many, how are we aware of similar complaints previously? Do we think there's going to be a number of similar complaints in the future? And it's those kind of things that we look at. So as things have been, yes, I've been satisfied that that's worked quite well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Widdowson.
It's a great report, right? There's loads and loads and loads and loads of details in it. For somebody like me, okay, and I don't know what everybody else is like, it would be even better if there was a summary at the start, rather than diving into each report and then having to go into the annex. If there could just be, and it may be to Councillor Cole's point, if there could just be one or two, maximum three, small, short paragraphs at the front, basically summarising what's in here, rather than I got lost between the tables and the numbers. And then you come back again and you go, oh yes, actually it is all doing this. But if that could just be just a short exec summary at the front, that'd be helpful for somebody like me.
I will certainly take that forward and share with Anthony and Aileen and Pauline to look at improving the layout and the format, the style and the content of the annual report. As we mentioned right at the very start, there are certain things that must be included, and certain layouts and formats and content that certain bits of the legislative requirements require you to do. But yes, I'll absolutely take that forward and share with Pauline and Aileen. And you might even get pretty pictures.
Well, this is it. It's always, I do like a good pie chart. Thank you very much. Any other questions from members? Well, thank you for coming for your annual outing. Would you, Lorraine?
I would just like to say, in all the different guises and of scrutinies that we've come to over the years, whilst we've been responsible for managing complaints, I am not going to get tearful. Who would think? But I would just like to pass on my thanks and to everybody that's been involved now and in the past in ensuring that we took forward everything that we could. We made these improvements. If I think back to when I first got this service area, and Kath even longer, it has been a great journey. We've made significant improvements, and it wouldn't have been possible without the support of the different committees, both in scrutiny and audit and governance, and obviously the support within the teams and service areas and CMT, etc. But I just want to say thank you. It's the last time you'll see us on annual complaints, but back onto audit and governance for information governance.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No, and thank you. And having been on the committee for some time, I've seen that kind of evolution and that progress, and yeah, I've seen no small part due to your commitments. Thank you very much. Right. Thank you. So let's move on to agenda item 6. So if I can invite Sean and your support crew to join us at the table, please. Councillor Kent, there's a seat for you as well. Okay, just make sure everyone's got the right nameplates. Okay, so this is a report on arising from an internal audit of the council's climate change programme, and we're being asked for our views on the team's proposed actions in response to that internal audit. So if I can hand over to you to introduce the report, please.
I'll just do a little introduction and then I'll hand over to Sean for the detail as
Yep.
usual. So thank you, Chair. We've brought the report today to review the recent audit by Verito in Annex 1. This time it focuses on the Climate Change Action Plan and the emissions reporting process. Positively, the audit reported sound governance and substantial assurance, provided with some recommendations. Those were related to categorisation, verified actions, biomass reporting in Scope 2, and expanding the range of emissions in Scope 3. We are today asking you to confirm our proposed response outlined in the report is proportionate and appropriate, and we're very happy to take further questions. I'll hand over to Sean for much more detail. Thanks.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is the second time in 4 years that the carbon reduction programme has been selected for random audit of council services. The audit started earlier this year. Working with Verito, we identified a couple of items of the team's work that would add that an audit would add most value to. They were identified as being the carbon emissions reporting process and the climate action plan. So Verito have undertaken those audits. Overall, their report concluded that there was a sound system of governance, risk management and control, and that overall the systems that were in place provided substantial assurance. Nevertheless, though, there were some opportunity areas identified for improvement, and Claire's just touched on those. The focus of this report and this session, and we're requesting feedback from members, is on our response to the findings and the proposed implementation of the actions that that have been recommended to us. 2 of those recommendations relate to the carbon emissions reporting process, and 2 of them relate to the action plan. On the action plan, one of the findings was around the wording and categorisation of the actions within that action plan. The proposed action in response to that is to revise the existing actions to ensure that they meet the SMART criteria wherever possible, and we will do that as part of the now biennial review cycle, and that will start January 2026 and run throughout that calendar year. One of the potential proposals is that a review of that revised action plan forms is returned to this scrutiny committee later in 2026 for comment, and we will build that into the programme plan for updating that climate change action plan. The second finding relating to the action plan was that actions are updated based on unverified information. So the current process is that the carbon reduction team would contact heads of service or action owners and request an update on the progress against that action. And that update would be given either verbally or via email, and we would report on that update. The auditors, Verito, would like to see some evidence that would support those verbal or email updates, and so our proposal is for action owners to provide evidence depending on the type of action. That could include decision papers, funder reports, sign-off certificates, photographs, dashboards, press releases or news articles to support the claims made around progress against those actions. The other two findings relate to the carbon emissions reporting process. One was around reporting of biomass-related Scope 2 emissions. This centres around the fact that we now purchase 100% of our electricity from renewable sources, and we use renewable energy guarantee of origin to verify that energy is from renewable sources. But within the definition of renewable, it does include biomass. And so whilst we've been reporting zero carbon emissions against our REGO supplied electricity, there needs to be an acknowledgement that a certain percentage of that comes from biomass, and therefore there is a carbon impact of that energy that's supplied. Under the current contract that we have with our energy supplier, we don't know what proportion of that REGO certified energy is from biomass, so we need to work with them to try and find out if we can report the carbon emissions associated with the biomass that's delivered, or the alternative is to switch to a separate contract that guarantees zero biomass as part of that overall bundle of REGO supplied energy. So we're looking to both of those options and make a recommendation once we have that information. And the final finding was around expanding the range of emission sources covered in Scope 3 and outsourced Scope 3 emissions. It's well documented that it's extremely challenging to calculate Scope 3 emissions. They are the emissions that are indirect to your organisation, so through third-party suppliers or providers. We have tried to work closely with procurement and some of our larger contract suppliers to identify the volume of Scope 3 emissions, and we have very good relationship, particularly with providers of our building service contracts, where we have been able to calculate Scope 3 emissions. But there is more work to be done. There's two ways that we're proposing to tackle that challenge. One is through the existing contracts that we've got and working with procurement to identify the largest contracts that we have and contacting those suppliers to see if we can support them or encourage them to report on Scope 3 emissions. And then the second way is through new contracts. And again, we'll be working with procurement and through the social value procurement framework to try and encourage future suppliers to report on carbon emissions associated with the goods and services and contracts that they're providing to the council. So as mentioned, encouraging conversation and feedback from members. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's on pages 93 and 94 of the agenda pack. There's a table setting out the audit finding and the proposed action and timescale. So, members, we're being asked for our views on the proposed actions. So all feedback is welcome. Councillor Merritt.
Reading the report, the actions seem reasonable to deal with the issues raised, and I'm assuming the dates are all October to try and ensure that we have a single report covering the lot, even if some things might possibly be done a bit earlier.
Yes, certainly with a couple of the actions relating to the carbon emissions reporting, they've already been incorporated into the emissions reporting cycle. A report went to combined EMDS last week, thank you, where one of those actions have been incorporated, which is around the biomass Scope 2 emissions, where we included biomass emissions associated with Greenwich Leisure Limited, GLL, our third-party provider of leisure facilities. But there is still a bit more work to be done on the REGO arrangements for those emissions, biomass emissions. So whilst that work has started in October, November 2025, there is more work to be done. And yes, for the others, they've been rolled into the Climate Action Plan update cycle in 2026.
Thank you. So a question for me around the action relating to getting verification to back up some of the verbal or email updates, which again seems eminently sensible. Do you have any sense of any issues that might cause for service areas in terms of, again, sort of how labour intensive might it be for some of the service areas to provide the information that you'll be expecting?
Yeah, we haven't tested this yet with the service areas, and it is, I suppose, it's a moderate recommendation within the audit report, and so the reports that we produce and the action plan that we produce does not hinge on the submission of evidence. It's just to bolster transparency and reliability of the action plan that we produce. I mean, undoubtedly, it will create slightly more work for service areas to provide that evidence. But if they're already producing that evidence as part of the project delivery and action plan delivery, then it should just be a case of attaching that information to the email or to the responses that they currently provide.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would hope and expect it wouldn't.
Yeah.
I would hope the information would be fairly readily available.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, we'll see. Councillor Widdowson.
It was a very good report from Verido for you. You know, it's more or less there. It has been there for a while. You've been buying green energy for over 6 years now. So there are always going to be tweaks, but they're very minor tweaks. The two things I'd ask for is, one, make sure that we're not asking for so much evidence that we stop doing. I think that's a real, if we're not careful, we'll be able to evidence everything, but we'll have stopped doing stuff. So just be aware that that doesn't go too far. And I was really pleased to hear you talk about procurement, because procurement are critical in all of this. I don't know how many conversations I've had with the head of procurement. That is where we can drive some of the change, but all the way through, not just the big fellas, all the way through the different people, without it, again, becoming onerous. There was a very good article today in the papers basically saying only very large companies are now being able to work with government because they're the only ones that can jump through all the various hoops. So procurement can drive it, but we need to be careful how we ask for evidence, how we ask for things to happen. But I thought it was a cracking report. Well done.
Yeah, noted. Thank you, Councillor. And on that procurement challenge, I absolutely agree. And we have had the discussion already with procurement about how we make sure that what we're asking for is proportionate and not disproportionately penalising smaller companies that have, as you say, might not have the resources to be able to do the work that we're asking for. So that is a consideration. Thank you.
Yeah, just on that, is there, I'm guessing there's templates either from government or other bodies that would help both procurement and your team in terms of, and suppliers, in terms of being able to report as best they can on Scope 3 emissions, or are we sort of trying to invent something ourselves?
Yes, there are, but I suppose they're typically utilised more on large scale infrastructure projects. I'm not so familiar with supplying of small scale goods and services. And again, I think we just have to be proportionate in what we're asking potential providers to do, because even templates can be onerous for some organisations to complete. So yeah, we'll try and take a proportionate approach that maximises the benefit.
Thank you. Do any of the members have any comments or questions? But I think you can take from the feedback that we're supportive of the proposed actions, which hopefully will satisfy internal audit that maybe they'll pick you again at random in 2 years' time and think of some more things to ask. But thank you for your attendance and
Thank you, Chair. And if acceptable for the forward plan, it might be worth scheduling in bringing the revisions to the climate change action plan to this committee in 2026.
Yep, no, that would make sure we get that plugged in.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair, sorry, you go first.
I
Yes.
say just because I think you're looking at work plan, maybe August, September next year would, because that would give time, genuine proper feedback, yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that. Thank you.
Just a note, Chair, I'm leaving this item and then I'm coming back for the next one, so.
Are you going to leave the table and then come back?
I am
Just
going to leave the
stay?
table. Oh, I could stay, couldn't I? I'll stay.
I think you should stay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll stay.
Yes, let's. So we move on to agenda item 7, monitoring and tracking of approved council motions. So Claire is staying with us for this, and we're joined by Sam Blythe, Head of City Strategy and Corporate Programmes. So
Jane was going to do the monitoring of the motions. We're doing the proposed process. So I don't know if Jane's with us. No.
Jane Miller.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So
So.
I tell you what, let's have a comfort break.
Okay, thank you.
Let's relocate Jane.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. We will now crack on with agenda item 7, update on council motions. So this is the section of the meeting where we review the status of approved council motions with a view to marking as completed any motions that we believe the actions have been completed, and providing feedback on any issues or concerns in terms of how those motions are being taken forward or not. So the best way to do this is just go through it page by page, starting on page 111 of the agenda pack. And that we're going all the way back to October 2022 with this motion. Was equality for disabled people, and you will recall that this was something that the public speaker mentioned earlier. So at present, the actions arising from the motion are all marked as complete. Would anyone like to comment? Councillor Merritt.
Yes, I think obviously technically they might be complete in the sense that action has been taken, but I think, you know, we obviously had some potential evidence that they aren't necessarily fully embedded, which is obviously part of the motion. So I think in that sense we ought to try and keep tabs on this particular one.
Yeah,
and obviously follow up out of this meeting on the particular issues that were raised.
Yeah. So perhaps if you and I as chair and vice chair identify the most appropriate officer to raise this with, just so we can make sure it's not overlooked. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. Just apologies if I have missed it in here, but I don't think I have. But I believe this was the council motion that the flying of the Disability Rights Month flag was going to be on the Mansion House. I know I've had conversations with the public speaker about this before, and I don't, as far as I'm aware, we still haven't got to the stage where that flag is able to fly at the Mansion House. And I remember from conversations when I was on the executive that was something that was still being pushed for. But unless I've missed it, I don't think it's mentioned in here as something that is still trying to be achieved.
Right. Okay. Well, if that was resolved to happen and it hasn't happened, then we can legitimately ask. Is it a case of another council has a flags protocol? Whether it's just a case of that hasn't been updated yet. But let's not dwell on flags. That's quite all right. That's fine. Well, the chair and vice chair and I will we will pursue that. It takes us on to going back to July 2023, the city response to food insecurity motion. There are a couple of items that are ongoing, but I think I'm sort of comfortable with them being retained as ongoing. There's a reference to links in with the neighbourhood model of working, which I know is still is in the process of being formalised and agreed. So if members are content to leave those as ongoing with the aim, perhaps at the next meeting, of being able to reflect how some of these resolutions are fed into those pieces of work. Okay. Councillor Healy.
The last action point on page 114 states a draft report for December 2025. I will go to people. No, it's okay.
Yeah,
that's fine. I thought it was going to place. Sorry.
Yes, it was a task and finish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we're now on to September 2023. The supporting people living with epilepsy. The first item, it's ongoing, but there's no indication of what actions, if any, have been undertaken or will be undertaken. So I think that needs to stay on there until we have something that will allow us to mark it as complete. And the next one is completed. Moving on to March 2024, making York a trauma-informed city. So we have a couple of one ongoing action. So picking up the point of procurement, which we've just discussed in the last agenda item, implications of making it a requirement in commissioned contracts that partner organisations can demonstrate they have or are implementing a trauma-informed framework, and we currently have nothing. So I think that, again, we do need something, and it's disappointing that, you know, it'll be 6 months since we've had this report in its previous iteration. There's still nothing in there. So we will keep it on there as ongoing until we get evidence to the contrary. Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, just to flag that the previous police, fire and crime commissioner is obviously mentioned in there. She is no longer in that post, so that probably should be updated as to who we're working with. Sorry, Deputy Mayor for Policing, Fire and Crime.
I think with a lot of these motions, it was correct at the time it was approved. So I wouldn't get too hung up about it, but no, good spot. So we'll leave that one as ongoing. The next one down, safeguarding future library provision. So we've got one item in progress, and under actions taken, it kind of describes the process. There has been a briefing on the library's assessment of the library's need assessment that took place last month. Would members be content to mark that as completed? Yeah. Obviously, there'll be further discussions about libraries, but I think as far as this motion is concerned, I think we could probably mark that as completed if members are happy with that. Okay. We then move on to affordable housing. Just one thing, if we can pick up some of the lead officers, not just here but elsewhere in the report, no longer work for the authority. So I would hope that could be fairly easily remedied. I'm sure whilst they still retain an interest, it would be unfair to expect them to pursue this from a different organisation. This one is, there's lots of gaps. So I don't think there's an awful lot we can do to, certainly there's no information that would enable us to mark any of these as completed. Councillor Healy?
Yeah, can we just note in the minutes and try and push it forward? This is 21st of March 24, so that's about 18 months ago. And a meeting will be scheduled in the future between essentially people that work for the authority. That seems a long time.
Yeah, and this is one of the issues that we've been having, which when we come on to the next agenda item in terms of how we try and improve the system, because we're just getting the same stuff back after a 6-month gap with very little having been done. And we do need to move on from that. Councillor Coles.
Just a suggestion, really. There is something quite laborious about us having to go through it in this way, whereas actually it might be easier to just have the list of the things that aren't done, as well as this, but just the kind of to-do list and when they're anticipated to be done, rather than us kind of trekking through every single motion to check whether or not it's done or not done, especially the older ones, because the older ones, it feels like, as Councillor Healy just said, there is more of a kind of urgency to the actions being delivered, whereas the more recent ones, I think our expectation would be more reasonable around it not having been delivered yet. But I don't know whether for the older ones we could just have a means of just flagging that they aren't done, or that, you know, things just changed and made the action less pertinent than it was at the time when the motion was passed. But yeah, I would kind of agree that some of these, it just feels like we're slightly looking at it the wrong way around.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a transparency perspective, it's important we don't just allow them to kind of drift off. You know, they were approved by council, and there does need to be a conclusion, but we can, when we come on to the next agenda item in terms of how we do improve matters going forward, we can bear that in mind. Councillor Widdowson?
Should be able to work these by now. Looking at this one, the affordable housing motion, and point 2 that's in there, isn't that what we were debating at full council? So we'd already agreed it before we got into the debate at full council, or am I just getting simplistic in my views, Stephen?
I'm not going to, we're not going to debate the content of the motion. All we're interested in is what's happened to them.
Okay.
It may be, you know, under actions taken following, you know, approval of the housing development programme update at full council in November 2025. This has now been, you know, but it needs somebody. It needs somebody to actually put that in.
Okay, but from we could update it because from the debate at full council it hasn't altered.
Yeah, but it's our role is to hold to account officers who are tasked with implementing motions approved by full council.
Okay.
Not necessarily to write their action plan for them. Councillor Merritt?
Shall we invite the lead officer and exec members to come to our next meeting to outline what is happening on if we get a written update in between?
I think a written update would be preferable.
If we don't get a written update, then
if we don't get a written
I'll leave officers to ponder that in terms of lengths we may need to go to.
It is a long time.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem unreasonable to expect something to have happened by now. I quite understand.
Yeah.
Councillor S. Comment on this. So I'm trying to help facilitate.
Yeah, no, that's all help is appreciated. Let's keep going. We're now on to just September 2024, reforming residents' priority parking. I know some aspects of that motion have been progressed, and we do have a descriptor under actions taken to explain what is yet to happen. So that's, I'm quite happy to keep that on there as ongoing. Yeah. We then move on to, yeah. Sorry,
Chair. I think on the first one we can say it's partly complete because there has been a simplification.
Yes,
agreed.
Yeah, so I think we can say where it says taken to a decision session on 21st of October, following which the changes have been agreed. So yeah, so it can more comprehensively explain what has happened. Okay, moving on to dignity in retirement. This is our old chestnut of letters in progress. So this is over a year ago. There was a resolution to send some letters, which apparently is still in progress, but this isn't new. We've been here before in terms of who's responsible for drafting and sending letters. Councillor.
Yeah, as someone who's named, and that's shameless, right? Make it quite clear that there's definitions of letters in progress. If I've not seen a letter, then I wouldn't suggest it's in progress.
Okay.
So I think there needs to be something in the lines of a letter has actually been written and is awaiting confirmation versus letter in progress. For this one, this has never been produced. So in progress means it's between somebody's fingers and the keyboard at the moment. So I think that kind of gives a false sense of, because there are legitimate issues where leaders, and we've discussed this with the monitoring officer, where group leaders can't agree. Yeah. There's a decision then has to be made of, do two leaders send it in their name, or does the whole thing fall if they can't? But that needs to be separate to a letter has never actually been written or circulated to anybody.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Healy.
Quickly, same thing. Given the fact that it was pertinent at the time, and I would suggest it's not pertinent now, perhaps we could just go back to the proposal and second of the motion and say, can we scratch that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the things have moved on in terms of winter fuel allowance eligibility. So it would clearly be nonsensical to send a letter that is no longer relevant. But yes, if we can feed that back, we'll feed that back to the officers who are progressing the letters, apparently, that perhaps they can stop progressing the letters.
Can we change ongoing to superseded?
I like that. Yeah, superseded. Excellent. I think we may use that term more often. So the next one down, I think can be marked as complete. It describes things that have happened. So I'm happy for the next one to be marked as completed. In which case we've got a superseded and a completed, and then the final completed. Therefore, that I think we can put that one to bed. So we're now into just a year ago, November 2024, protecting more of York's community assets. Again, the first two, we need something, some description, either ongoing, in progress. So there's really not a lot more we can do to close the first two. Councillor Rare?
Yeah, I'm just thinking in terms of what the opposite of superseded is. So obviously this is quite a live one at the moment. We have a situation in the city around this that would have benefited from this work having been done at the time. So is there some way we can flag the cost of not progressing these actions more swiftly?
Yeah, I suppose it's we'd like to think when we put forward motions to council, there's a point to them and they're potentially impactful. This is a good example. I think all we can do is sort of reiterate the request for an update, given that it's it's particularly pertinent. I think the third one down, it's been added to the place scrutiny work plan. So as far as I'm concerned, that action is complete. Obviously, we can see what scrutiny does with it, but I think we can mark that as complete. Now, moving down to protecting York's primary and social care providers. Oh, it's another letter. There's no action, but apparently it's ongoing. So I think that's another one we can task the political assistants with figuring out what's happened to that letter.
Yeah, we put that and then superseded by event.
I can't hear you. Your microphone's not on.
Can we add that to the superseded by events? As employers' national insurance contributions went up in the last budget almost a year ago.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's. I suppose the question is still legitimate. There's an argument. It's now not timely. What do people think? We can mark it as superseded. I think if I received a letter saying a year ago we discussed this and we're now sending you a letter, I might not take it that seriously. Councillor Widdowson?
I think it's completely superseded because it's just creating recycling that we don't need.
What do people think? Yeah. Okay. We then move on to renewing York's commitment to fair trade. Yeah, there's lots of empty boxes. Well, there you go. Yeah, I don't think we can mark any of that as completed, and look forward to boxes being populated when we next receive the report. But as we said, the letter has been sent, so that's progress. We're into 2025 now. Introduction of a visitor levy. Well, a letter has been sent. Are members happy that we can mark that as completed. In terms of research collated, Councillor Wells.
It says policy development will only begin after discussion with the hospitality sector. So who is doing that?
Good question. Councillor Baxter.
There is a meeting with YSJ's Policy Lab on next Tuesday, 18th, off the top of my head. I don't know if that can be added in as more progress, more than just a letter sent, an actual meeting with humans.
Yeah. Councillor Eyre.
I think this one feels like it's not far from being there, but it does need some level of closure, sort of like explore the feasibility and practical mechanisms for introducing. It seems like a lot of that work has been done, but you do then actually have to have something. I'm not sure where. It's not necessarily for us as Scrutiny to come, but something that comes at the end going, this is what we found as a result of all the research.
Yeah, so if we leave it open for now, and then hopefully in a few months' time there'll be the outputs of those discussions will allow us to put it to bed. Next one down, changes to disability and long-term sickness benefits. Letters have been sent. Task and Finish group has been convened.
Text happens about that.
So it's completed. So let's leave it as completed. Working to tackle growing epidemic of violence against women and girls. Councillor Eyre?
Have we done the bottom one of that done, which is the relevant scrutiny committee to undertake the Task and Finish group?
Yeah.
Has that happened?
It's happening.
It's happening.
Yes.
Oh, it's on the page above. Sorry.
Yes, I should have. Yes. Yeah, indeed. So the next one down, the violence against women and girls motion. There's quite a detailed list of actions in response. Still marked as ongoing. Are people happy if it stays ongoing, or to mark as complete?
By the time of the meeting.
Yes. Will be issued. So I personally think there's enough information there to certainly give me comfort that all of the resolutions are being progressed. Yeah. Okay. Let's mark that as complete. Then we're into July of this year, improving equality of access to elections. Letters are in draft. And then there was work on the third bullet will commence when the new chief executive arrives. Okay. So we'll leave that as ongoing until the letters are sent. We're then on to supporting York's small businesses. So we've got an update on the parking review that will is Arup the consultants who are doing yep. People happy for that to be marked as completed? Yep. Okay. Non-proliferation of fossil fuels. Letters are in drafts. The council is now a signatory to the treaty. So if we leave it as ongoing pending the letters being sent. Yeah. Planning process improvements. There's some of it to do. So if we probably best leave that as ongoing for now. People happy with that? But it should be fairly it should be a fairly easy one to close at the next meeting. Fair funding for York. We've got a detailed list of actions taken and it's marked as completed. Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair. It asks for something in here. Council resolves to call on the council leader to do something. The first bullet point, it says, you know, make formal outline any formal representations. That's not covered in the actions taken.
I suppose you could consider action 1. The council responded, the leader responded on behalf of the council. I don't know. That's my reading of that, is that certainly that would be the formal representation by completing the formal consultation.
Okay, I'm not quite sure that was the spirit in what it was written, but
yeah. So there's nothing here about well, I don't know, Councillor Eyre.
I suspect this is one for the leader. We shouldn't close it without getting a response from the leader, because if this is closed as is, that states clearly that the leader nor any other political leaders did anything other than the official council response from finance. If that's true, that's true. That's what if we close it down, that's that. So the leader may want to amend that to suggest if there was any other form of representation. So if we then close it at the end of,
leave it open, sort of pending any further.
I understand where Nigel's, what Councillor Eyre is coming from, but you know, when there's a formal consultation, you have to go through the formal consultation processes, and anything that doesn't go through that probably doesn't in effect get counted. So I think in the particular circumstances, it's perhaps effectively has been completed.
So he talks about outline any formal representation. It doesn't talk about informal. But I mean, we can, I suppose we could loop back and ask if there's anything that the leader or Debbie Mitchell would, or Councillor Lomas would want to add, but yeah, I'm not sure. But if we can check, and then if there's nothing further to add, we can just mark it as complete.
I'm confused because I'm not entirely sure what political leaders means, because we made representation. So technically, the submission from the Audit Petitions should be included as part of that as well, Ben.
Well, this is the thing of trying to, you know, of interpreting motions after they've been written to think what was meant. Okay, well, we'll check if there's anything else that Councillor Lomas or Councillor Douglas would want to add, but if not, I'd be happy to mark it complete as it is. Okay, we're nearly there. We've done fossil fuels, haven't we? Yes. Pavement parking. Work is underway on a written submission. So we've got a fairly helpful update there. Is there anything else people think we're lacking, or are we okay to complete it? Because obviously it's not a decision the council can make. Yeah. So happy to mark that's complete. And that's the end. Thank you for that. So, having talked about the imperfections of our current approach to tracking council motions, I'll now hand over to Claire and Sam to introduce agenda item 8, talking about proposed changes to the process to respond to council motions.
Thank you. And that discussion was really timely, in fact, to help inform the next discussion. So thank you. So we're bringing a report to you today to invite Scrutiny Committee to consider a review of the process to respond to council motions. We've asked you two particular issues to consider, but given the context of the discussion we've just had, you might wish to broaden that. So the two issues within the report we'd like you to consider are whether there should be a time limit to motions, for example, within administrative term. And secondly, whether groups would provide proposed motions to democratic services with a longer lead time to allow for an assessment of the options and constraints before full council are invited to consider the motion. The proposal set out today is to ensure motions are actioned in a timely manner and to proactively articulate to the government issues that are pertinent to residents, so we represent York's interests to correspondents as a result of the motion in a timely manner. We would welcome your thoughts on the revised process, which is ultimately designed to support yourselves as groups and also the communities who raise and have their motions agreed at full council. You've identified in the last conversation a few points that we might wish to consider as well, such as categorisation of whether it's completed or superseded and the stages of letter production. So very much welcome your thoughts. I'll just hand over to Sam just to provide some more detail.
Thank you. So the paper as proposed sets out a revised process for responding to motions, coordinated by the City and Corporate Strategy team, my team, working alongside colleagues from Democratic Services, Council's management team, and other relevant service areas. It's about responding in a timely manner to activity identified. Obviously, the conversation we just had around kind of some of the motions reaching back a couple of years. As a case in point, and enable, where applicable, greater coordination of government affairs activity with regard to writing out to Secretaries of State and other ministers. The process set out in paragraph 9 of the report, but in effect, the proposals are officers to support the process of motions from reception due to completion, with the strategy team being both a coordinating and convening function across the council. On that note, I'm happy to take any questions on the proposed approach.
Thank you very much. So just, I suppose by way of context, there were discussions, I can't remember when it was, in the context of the council's constitution in terms of council motions. So that I think that there have been some discussions not that long ago about council motions. So this kind of, I think, follows on from that, and as we've highlighted from the previous discussion, the current system is imperfect, and it does cause some frustration for councillors who spend time drafting motions and then debating and getting them approved, and then just see them rather sit on a shelf and be overlooked. So thank you for thinking about it, and thank you for bringing these suggestions for us to discuss. So I will now invite comments from members. Councillor Eyre.
Yeah, I think broadly welcome the majority of it. I don't see the need for 10A and 10B. I think in all honesty, and that discussion actually was quite helpful, because when you consider that the biggest block of all of this was writing a letter, and so no level of contacting officers 3 months in advance to check whether it's doable. Will you be able to write a letter? Yes. But then obviously that becomes the actual stumbling blocks. It doesn't seem to be. Actually, when we looked at those, some of the more complex issues that require, I mean, there was the one with the work with the Uxs and Johns, etc., or some of the supplementary planning document stuff. All the really difficult work that you would be considered has all been done. Where we tend to fall down on is much more on the more simplistic ones. So I don't think it's practical or necessary, or actually strangely constitutional, because at the end of the day, if somebody doesn't contact officers 2 months before the council meeting and submits the motion, the monitoring officer can't then rule that motion as being out of order because it hasn't been through a sifting process months in advance. So I struggle with that one. And the time limit, I can see where you're getting at, but I think you've sort of seemed to have struggled as well here on what that time limit is, because then if we pass a motion in January, because February and March time, the next full council meeting, that will only last for just over 12 months, and then it'll be written off. So that 4-year cycle doesn't work as a natural cut-off point. And some issues will span. We've got the climate change motion. That thing that we're saying at the speech at the beginning of every council meeting, that was, I believe, outside of this 4-year term. So agreeing that means that that goes out the window straight away in terms of that and a lot of the things. So could see a certain thing on a time limit, but I don't see how we could come to a particular period. And we shouldn't, in the end, we shouldn't be taking 3-4 years to get through some motions. We should just actually go, let's get this process in place. Let's get the motions implemented within 18 months, and then it doesn't matter about the time limit.
Sam, Claire?
I think just reflecting on the previous conversation, I think the word superseded is probably a useful definition to work from. I think that was in respect to some of the motions being time limited by the previous government, for instance, so policies moved on. So I think I take that point.
Yeah, I think where a motion is clearly subsided due to a change of government policy, for example, I think we're fine to draw a line under it rather than arbitrarily say, right, the end of this 4-year term has come, therefore it's going to scrap everything that's been agreed. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to make a similar point about how if we're bringing motions about devolution or climate change, I don't think they should be sort of limited to a term. And then the other thing that I was just going to ask about, and it might be more my kind of ignorance, is how members or executive members are being updated on these processes, or is it just, oh, we've sent that letter about the motion that came 18 months ago now? Because I think, you know, if you're a member that's brought this motion, you're probably passionate about it and therefore would want to be involved or help that process. Like if it's, you know, helping with writing the letter or that sort of thing. But from my personal experience, I don't think I've ever kind of been involved in that process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. We need a closure point then, don't we? So we just share what's happened or where we've got to, or where the council officers have got to on the progress of the motion. So yeah, that's fine. We can add that in.
Yeah, so I think it picks up, it's 9 Roman numeral 6. Strategy team works with lead accountable officer. Maybe it's one of the later points. Yeah, sorry, Roman numeral 7. Strategy team progresses approval of the plan of activities with the relevant director and then relevant executive member. You could add, and the mover of the motion, you know, assuming they knew what the intention was when it was proposed. Not always the case. Councillor Widdowson.
Just got 2 points I'd like to make. Point 6. It would be whoever's council plan it is. You can't tie it back to the 4 commitments. So that needs to come out. And in order to talk about superseding or drawing a line under, would it be helpful to, at 6 months, if it's not finished, you rag rate it, you put a red on it and you say, what are we going to do? If at 9 months it's not finished, it goes to the chief exec, what are you going to do? So that something happens and it doesn't get to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years time. That'll put you a timeline on it rather than us waiting for something in 2022 to happen.
I think the issue of kind of escalation is an interesting one in that obviously there is currently no escalation process and things just sit there. So from your team's perspective, Sam, is it helpful for you to have some kind of, you know, I'm sure you can escalate things and I'm sure you would, but do we need to kind of describe what that escalation is? I don't know. Councillor Merritt?
I think a mechanistic time approach would not be right because it needs to be more horses for courses in terms of the nature of the particular motion and opportunities for doing things relative to existing priorities. So I don't think that particular approach is that helpful. But a second point I wanted to make, not on that. I think the point that was made earlier about being clearer on process on when we finish, when we write things off. If there's been major legislation that's superseded it or other things, then actually if we define that better, hopefully we will actually finish a lot of these earlier. Plus obviously with the support of getting letters written in a reasonable period of time and not
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Wells.
I kind of think that it would be helpful to have a timeline, and to say that if it's not done by then, this happens and then that happens, because then at least you're reporting back at the time and not 2 or 3 years after we found out that nothing's happened.
Yeah, if you could, Clive, just consider what.
Yeah, I think we can absolutely include some sort of time frame, and maybe part of the motion could indicate what that might be. So needs to be acted within 6 months, or particularly thinking about that one earlier around the music venue, whether it needs to be acted even earlier. It is just worth noting, of course, that motions and full council can't direct officers to do work, so that will have to be prioritised within existing resources, which might then stretch out that timeline. And it's where we have that conversation. So whether that's the new chief executive conversation, or whether that's something we bring back to scrutiny, or possibly needs a bit of thought, really.
So just picking up on that point, is just so I understand the point at 9 Roman numeral 6 in terms of lead accountable officer to understand how the motion aligns with the council plan. So of whoever's council plan it is at that time. So is that kind of saying if a motion is, not aligned with the council plan, would that be sort of deprioritised?
Yes.
Okay. Right. Okay. No, I just wanted to understand what was meant by that. Councillor Eyre.
I was just reflecting on Councillor Merritt's wise words earlier on a different agenda item, and perhaps if after a period of 6 months or 9 months, the director or executive member, etc., were invited to the meeting to explain the lack of progress on the motion in their area, that might focus their minds a little bit more in terms of making sure they don't have to come to this meeting.
And that would be in our gift to request/require the attendance of an officer if, having, let's say we've had the same report three times over an 12-month period and still no further forward. I think that probably would be appropriate. Yeah. Okay.
I think the need for horses, of course, is if you go back to the motions we were looking at earlier, like the parking on the pavement one, that motion is very dependent on a piece of government legislation, which we have absolutely no control over. So I think so long as there's reporting back at a reasonable frequency, whether we choose to escalate is more a discretionary matter in the light of the facts of the case. So I think that's perhaps the distinction that Margaret and me could make.
Yeah, with the best of intentions, we as an authority are limited in how we can move an issue forward because we're not the decision maker. I saw a hand somewhere. Councillor Healy.
Going back to point 6, it may be worthwhile when the motion is accepted by Democratic Services, if it doesn't fall into the council plan 23-27, there's like a tick box that says, does this conform to the council plan? Yes, no. Just to give the writer of the motion the hint that they may want to come up with something that is actually likely to get actioned.
That presupposes we go down the route of getting clearance for council motion?
No, it's not clearance, it's information from the writer of the motion.
No.
I don't understand.
So if we're saying here on point 6, the strategy team works with the lead accountable officer to understand how the motion aligns to the council plan 23-27.
This is having been
passed.
Yes.
I'm saying that if when you submit the motion, it comes back and says, yes, this is a valid motion, but it doesn't conform to the council plan, at least the mover of the motion then has some idea and some foreknowledge that they're writing something that is just unlikely, even if adopted, to ever be actioned. Going back to the point you made about full council can't tell officers to do things. i.e. we should stop writing pointless motion.
Oh,
Councillor.
yeah. I listened to Paul. I think we just park that all completely because I think council plans by their very nature are quite broad. And I don't think officers could, to particularly any motion, say that this is nothing to do with equality, affordability, climate change or health. It would become a pointless argument between the mover of the motion saying, well, actually, this fits into the principle here. Officers saying, well, we don't think it fits into the principles in terms of this. And there is no conclusive, you can't have that tick box that says, yes, this is in compliance with, I mean, it'd have to be quite a rogue motion to be totally out of that one. So we're going to,
it's not unheard of.
Well, from certain groups, but from most of the councillors, I would expect that the council motions would in some way impinge on the key principles of the council plan in some way, shape or form. It becomes a question of to what degree of conformity is there, and are there other things that we are prioritising that are more in conformity, and that's a policy and a political decision.
And I think it would be very difficult for that conversation to be had ahead of the motion being debated, because it would put officers in a difficult position in terms of saying, we don't think your motion is aligned enough with the council plan. I think it's a discussion that can be had afterwards in terms of from a prioritisation perspective. Claire?
Yes, exactly. It could be had afterwards. I suppose it's worth bearing in mind that officers' capacity is targeted with supporting our residents, and occasionally international motions might be presented. And it's at that point we need to think about, actually, do you have capacity in the council, depending on the scale of the motion, obviously, to support our international community? And it's just those types of issues that we have to balance up with what is ever limiting resource, essentially.
Okay. So, does anyone have any further comments for Claire and Sam to consider as they embark on this exciting adventure? Was that in any way, shape or form helpful?
Really super helpful. Thank you ever so much. And what we will do with yourself, Chair, if we may, is when we've gone through the first cut of maybe looking at those outstanding actions in the report you talked about previously to this discussion item, if we make sure it works for yourself prior to sharing it with the whole of the committee in, I guess, 6 months, is it?
Yeah, if you use the vice chair and myself as a sounding board, that'd be great.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. Thanks all.
Thank you very much. So you're not taking on petitions as well, are you? No. Okay. Oh, that's a shame. In which case, thank you for your attendance. So we now move on to agenda item 9, report of the Director of Governance on the schedule of petitions. In the absence of the Director of Governance, I'll introduce this report. So, it's blurring the boundary between officers and members. That's just, it's wrong on so many different levels, but never mind. This is a regular report that we receive that invites us to consider how the petitions that have been submitted to council are being progressed. It's not for us to agree or disagree with the actions that have been taken in response to the petition. It's more to be assured that the petition has been received and has been given due consideration, rather than being put on a shelf and forgotten about. So we have our schedule of petitions beginning on page 151 of the report pack. Where they're marked as closed, I propose we don't discuss them and try and reopen them unless anyone has any major concerns. So beginning on page 152, a petition that's currently marked as open, although there's an update provided in the action column stating actions that's been taken and work that is underway, which makes me inclined to believe that it can be marked as closed. Or do members want to see what the outcome of that work is before? Okay. Councillor Widdowson?
Can I just say this? I agree. If it's saying it's closed, fine, move on. But I would suggest we add another column in so that we know which ward and which councillor proposed this, if it was, or where it came from, and that have they agreed it's happened? Because then we can just close it.
I mean, some petitions will be presented by councillors, but not necessarily often on behalf of residents. So I think.
Okay, so by ward.
I think ward.
Okay, ward, and then talk to whoever brought the petition. If they say it's done, it's done. Because they are the ones that produced the petition.
Well, it's not always that straightforward. I'm happy to leave it open if
I think we ought to leave it open, because the reality is, yes, it says a feasibility study will be conducted.
Right.
But we know with the workloads in that department, it may be years.
Okay.
If not.
Yeah. I mean, those things preempt.
And just one of building on what you said earlier, Councillor Fenton, is also all the officer responsibles are wrong. They're all in different.
James Gilchrist, yes.
Yeah, they're just not around.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Right. We'll leave it open and make a note about updating the officer responsible to someone who's still working for the authority. We now move on to petition 212, Tranby Avenue parking. And there's reference to a consideration at a decision session where a decision was taken. Do we want to mark that as completed? Councillor Coles?
Should have been.
I'm slightly confused about the kind of remit of the petition submission process, in terms of what the requirements are on officers to action something that is presented. We don't vote on them. They just get presented.
Yep.
So they're completely laudable, most of them. But I guess the question is, what is the governance process? As in, what are the requirements on officers to provide that kind of update? As in, it's useful for the elected member who might have an interest in something happening in their own ward, and their petition might have been brought with that in mind, all very sensible. Yeah. But actually, if they have just brought a petition because the residents asked them to, I guess the question is, why are we asking officers to run around? It's a governance question, I guess.
Yeah, no, so there's a requirement of officers to consider the petition, but not to, as in this case, to stop the university-related parking issues. That's quite a tough ask. But so the officers have described the action that's been taken. It's for us to determine is that are we content that the petition has been given due consideration? What we're not saying is have the actions that the petitioners have called for been implemented, because in many cases a decision will be taken not to, and that's fine. Are we content that it's been given due consideration and can now be closed, Councillor Wells?
Is feedback given to the person, to the councillor who's put it then? Or do they just put the petition in and then council officers either do or don't do anything, and they don't know? Because presumably the point of putting a petition in is because the residents have asked for something, and so it would be good if the councillor could report back.
Yeah, I think from my experience, at least, it's you normally find out if you notice it's been mentioned in a report going to an executive member decision session, but I don't recall ever having been told that petition you presented, this is, it's being considered, it's not, either something is or it's not happening. But I suppose that's a valid kind of process point.
Is that part of the process when the item's dealt with that the lead petitioner is informed? I thought that was part of the normal process.
I honestly don't know. Reese?
So I just know in regards to e-petitions, I'm not sure about other petitions, the lead petitioner is made aware of officers, they get a response from officers within a certain amount of working days from the actions that they're going to take or have been taken.
Okay.
I'm not sure about other petitions other than e-petitions.
Okay, thank you for that.
Perhaps it might be worth just having that extra column, you know, whether the lead petitioner has been told the outcome.
Yeah.
Because at that point, we know it's been dealt with.
Yeah.
And then it can be crossed off, whatever the decision was.
Okay, Councillor Wright?
Yeah, I was about to suggest we didn't disappear down that minefield, because I'm not sure if it is this particular one, but using this one as an example, there are occasions when a council has put forward a petition, the council has taken a course of action as a result of the petition, which the petitioners then object to, because they don't think it's the right action. So I think we should go back to the bit that you sort of said earlier on about just saying, has something happened? Yes.
Yeah.
And let's not dig into.
Yeah, and that's
because they wanted single yellow lines, and you've given them double yellow lines, and they then speak against the double yellow lines because that's not what they wanted. So it just has something happened? We can, yes.
Yeah.
And just go back to flagging the ones where clearly nothing has happened and say that's.
Yeah, we're not debating the appropriateness or otherwise of the council's response to the petition, more that it has been considered and a decision has been made or an action has been taken, and that action could be to note the petition. End of story.
It's just that my concern is that if you then had that column in and that councillor is then contacted to say we're going to go to scrutiny and Marcus says yes, then you've poked the bear, and that person is then going to come to scrutiny and say you've marked me down, and it just doesn't. Some things sometimes don't need to be opening.
I don't, you know, I said I wouldn't object to people being told what's going on. I mean, a lot of councillors will keep an eye on something to see where it does end up. But yeah, well, Reece, your feedback was helpful, but maybe there needs to be something similar for if someone hands in a paper petition, that they are afforded a similar sort of update. So maybe that's something that can be factored in. Conscious not to get too bogged down in process matters, but is this okay? Right. Well, let's plough on. Councillor Healy.
Okay. In the same way that item 8 starts with, this report invites the scrutiny committee to consider a revised process to support full council motions. Perhaps we should go back to the authors of this document, who I presume gave their apologies for not presenting the report, that they might want to look into doing the same, because a lot of this, I get the feeling that people don't seem to be tremendously happy with how it's working at the moment in a variety of ways.
Yeah, I mean, and I think if we can crack council motions, this is the next one on the list to work on. But we're in a better place than we were, so let's have a glass half full approach. Right, let's crack on. Right, 213, reduce HMO thresholds. Yes, you took the words out of my mouth. We have a sort of detailed description of action taken. Are we happy to close that? Okay. 217, cycling facilities on Wentworth Road. Yeah, I think I'm happy with the action taken. 220, it's on the list for Res Park, so we can close that. 222 is already closed. 225, connections bus number 16. Petition acknowledged. I know that it's there's a new operator for that service anyway. So, and I'm pretty sure it did go to a decision session. I can't remember. But I think potentially that can be closed because there is now a new timetable in effect. So, yeah. So I think the action column needs updating, but I think once that's done, it can be closed. Oh, 228 zebra crossing request. Acknowledged insight meeting with lead petitioner. I'm not sure.
I mean, the decision needs to be, has it gone on the list?
Yeah.
For schemes, or has someone decided it doesn't qualify?
Yeah,
we haven't got an outcome here.
Yeah.
We've had something happen, but that's.
So there's been a site meeting. We just need to know, is it on the list for consideration?
Or it's been dismissed.
Yeah. So we'll leave that open for the time being. 20 mile an hour speed limit in Cottonthorpe, petition acknowledged.
Similar.
Again, we need to understand what the next step is. Zebra crossing in New Earswick.
Is it necessary for us to understand what the next step is? Is it not just enough that it's been acknowledged, the people know that something's happening? Do we have to know what action is going to be taken?
Yeah, even if we don't necessarily know, we don't need to know the outcome necessarily, but we need to know that, because it could be acknowledged and then just ignored. So we need a positive kind of confirmation that will be added to the list for consideration. I think we need something like of that nature.
I think we need to go back to why this process actually exists.
Yeah.
And it exists because people used to put petitions in, councils used to put petitions in, and they disappeared into a black hole. And this is a system that was set up by us as councillors to try and make sure that didn't continue, and that we actually did make things happen, or if it wasn't justified, not happen. But
yeah, Councillor.
I think, put very simply, if you think about it as receiving an email, if you responded to an email from a resident and said, "I've received this email," I don't think the resident would be particularly happy. If you replied back and said, "Thank you for that, I'm going to go ahead and do this as a result of that," or "I'm not able to go ahead and do this because of something else," but just replying back and going, "I've acknowledged your email," wouldn't go down particularly well. So moving on to 232, we've got there's a bit more detail. There was a paper did go to a decision session on future policy in terms of prioritisation of new crossing points. This concludes saying a paper to outline where the two crossing points are in the process would follow later in the year, presumably meaning this year. So I suppose that there's an acknowledgement that there will be an update in terms of where the requested crossings feature. Is that sufficient, we think, to mark it as complete, Councillor Merritt?
I may be wrong, but I do usually look at the decisions, the transport exec member decisions, and I don't actually recall that report going.
There was a report that there was an annex which was a list of they kind of ranked crossing requests.
In which case I missed that one. Apologies.
But I don't think this was on it. Yeah, this wasn't on it, which may have prompted the petition. No, it predates that. So I think we're still waiting on the back of the decision that was made early in June, understanding where this crossing request will feature. But I'm assured that it's in the system and is being given consideration. So I think it can be closed. The next one down, an officer's awaiting a hard copy of a petition. So I think we just have to leave that one as open. Well, indeed. So the next one, Rest Park petition Greenfields. I must admit, I don't know where Greenfields is. And we know nothing we know nothing about the status of that. So I think we leave that open and just request further information. 236, there's a sort of detailed action, and this refers to the parking review that we discussed earlier. I can't remember in what context. Are we content to mark that as complete, as being there's a plan of action? 237. So that has been decided, has it not? Or is to be decided? So I think we can mark that as complete in anticipation of there being a decision. The next one down is already closed. Fulford Cemetery. 239, cap the number of students at university. There is a response has been provided. I don't think there's anything more the council can reasonably do, so we can close that one. 240. Again, we've got the parking review, so I think that can be marked as closed. 241. It's the 20-mile-an-hour request from Poppleton. It's yeah. So again, I think we'll close that. Beckfield Lane crossing petition. Well, there's nothing, so we need to understand. Is the update similar to the previous crossing or what? So we'll have to leave that one open. Then we've got another 243 parking with a similar response to the other parking related petition, so we're happy to close that. Just Dualit, Councillor Widdowson.
I don't know whether I'm being mischievous, but the two Lib Dem motions have got nothing against them, whereas the other ones seem to have a lot of detail against them.
These are petitions, not motions.
Oh, sorry. I don't know whether I'm just being mischievous in that thought.
Yes, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's, but it's disappointing. There's nothing for the two Lib Dem presented petitions, but let's move on. So we'll keep 244 open. Policing in York. We've got an update which, well, it's already closed, so let's leave it closed. And then 246, I think we can close that because the petition has been acknowledged and it's been added to the list. And then finally 247, another Lib Dem petition with absolutely no actions. Hey ho. Well, no. So we'll leave that open pending some actions being added. Thank you for that. These are always painful agenda items, and I really hope going forward we can get to a place where this is a less painful exercise, because it just feels a bit like Groundhog Day. But Councillor Maroney.
To add to your pain, Chair, but hopefully a quick question. Presumably the petitions are numbered sequentially. What's happened to the ones that are missing? Thank you.
That's so they'll have been. I'm slightly guessing here. They will have been closed previously. So the ones that appear on here as closed had not been closed at the last when we last looked at this report. Does that sound? I'm convinced myself that's the right answer, but
I'll buy that. Thank you.
That's fine.
That's how it's meant to work.
Well, then I found my calling. I believe that's how it's meant to work, and I have faith that is what's happening. Okay, thank you for taking the time to go through that. Finally, work plan. So our January meeting, we are due to receive the report of the budget and medium-term financial strategy task and finish group. And Sean Gibbons will be coming back to talk to us about City Leap and seeking our input into the next phase of that project. So at the moment, January looks a fairly light agenda. Obviously, if officers come to us and want to bring items for our input prior to decisions, we'd be happy to receive them. But Councillor Eyre.
Well, it's just an observation. I'm having to quickly Google it as well. We've got digital switchover, which we agreed ages ago. How time sensitive is that one in terms of, do we need to get that in January, or shall we reintroduce the word superseded again and say the digital switchover has happened? So.
Well, the last I heard from Jane Mellor, who discussed it with Roy Grant, it said that there was likely to be something to brief us on in the new year. Now, we'd kind of penciled that in as one more for a briefing than a kind of scrutiny item. So, I mean, it is happening. So I'll check with Roy via Jane where we are with that, because if he's able to do a briefing for members, we can get that done. Or if there are, if there are decisions for the council to make in terms of how it supports residents with a switchover, then that could be something that comes here for discussion. But if it's more providing us with information about how it's going and how it will be managed, there's probably more a briefing than a scrutiny item. Yeah.
Very briefly, just to check whether we might want Sarah or someone from adult social care there as well, because obviously that's the telecare issues and people making sure they have continuity.
Yeah,
that for me is a bit more of a reassurance that all those people are getting the support they need.
Yeah, I mean, Roy can tell us about the technical aspects, but yeah, we can make sure we get all relevant officers there. So anyone have any questions to ask about the work plan?
Super quickly. So has the topic for the 4th of December briefing been determined yet?
It's not something I've discussed with James yet, but I know you've got irons in fires. Do go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, we've got we're going to have an update on around, I think, something the committee had requested previously around major project management. I think that's going to be the main item, and then the second item is TBC, but we should have that settled this week. So hopefully we'll give members an update in the next few days.
Yeah. That's the project management item came from just a couple of meetings ago. We had the report on Station Gateway and Castle and Eye of York, and talking about the council's new approach to major project management, and I think it'd be useful to sort of better understand how that's working. Okay. There's no urgent business, so thank you very much for your attendance and participation, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.